Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. The results from this year's election were historic. Donald Trump won Miami-Dade County by 11 points, which is all the more remarkable when you remember that just 8 years ago, he lost Dade to Hillary Clinton by 29 points. That's a 40-point swing in just 2 election cycles. Donald Trump is the first Republican presidential candidate to win Miami-Dade County since George H.W. Bush won it in 1988. Trump's blowout win in Dade and across Florida ushered in a wave of Republican candidates into the newly created constitutional offices here in South Florida. And for the first time in 60 years, Miami-Dade has elected a sheriff, Rosanna Rosie Cordero-Stutz. And the new sheriff is here with us now. Welcome, Sheriff.
Thank you.
So,
good to be here.
A couple of things real quick. You formally take office in January, right? That's when you get sworn in as the new sheriff?
Yes, that is correct.
But it's not as if you've got nothing to do between now and then.
That is also correct.
We talked about you, and you have said before that your work really starts on November 6th. So how are things going in the first 2 days of the transition?
Very, very busy. So yeah, I reported right to the office the next day. We have what I call, phase 2 of the transition. Phase 1 being all the pre-work we did in order to get us up to the statutory requirements to make sure that we were ready for the sheriff-elect. And here I am now as a sheriff-elect. So here we are.
So what was the emotion of the night? I mean, I watched you, and we talked about it a little bit briefly afterwards, where I said the thing that caught me was the joy and relief and the emotion that you had on that night. You're not a politician. You're not someone who's used to this. This campaign got ugly in certain ways, got personal. You don't have the thick skin of a seasoned politician that lets those attacks roll off you. So what was it like on election night for you?
It was pretty sweet victory, actually. I think I ran a campaign that was about my message, and it was about my qualifications for the position, and it was about the mission and the vision that I have for Miami-Dade County. And to feel that the community heard me and supported me in that was amazing, because every step of the way, everyone said I would not be successful using that formula.
Tell me what the formula was, and explain it to me.
That's it. That's the formula.
Just telling them people what you want, being yourself.
Me,
gotcha.
Being a professional, being honest, and upholding myself to the standards that I have lived by for 28 years as a police officer in this community.
So there are some people in Dade County who woke up the day after the election somewhat concerned, somewhat, taken aback by the size of Donald Trump's victory and some of the other races. I won't ask you to comment on, for instance, our new election supervisor who may or may not actually believe who won the 2020 election. But there are people, my point is, who are uncertain about the future. You did win in part because of the support of Donald Trump and Donald Trump supporters. When you look at that, what do you tell them in terms of, should they have any concerns that you are just an extension of whatever Donald Trump ends up doing in Washington?
Well, Jim, I would argue that maybe he also won Dade County in part for me being here in Miami-Dade. See, because I have served this community for 28 years. I have been here. I am someone who is fully qualified to run the sheriff of office right here or anywhere in this country. It is the love of this job and this profession. That's the reason I do it. I didn't do it for the title of sheriff. In fact, a little over a year ago, I would have told you I never wanted that kind of a position or a job. But with that said, let's go backwards. This country clearly spoke out loud when it comes to this particular election cycle. And that's just a reality. I think I would like to see us all be able to get back to a place where we can have conversations about where is our vision as a country? What do we want out of our future, out of our parties? Maybe those are the better conversations to have, except the extreme right or the extreme left. For me, it's about safety. For me, it's about ensuring that we can all go out with our families and feel safe and secure, that we can have our businesses, that we can really feel safe. I want my kid to have a future right here in this county, to be able to do whatever he wants to do. But it matters what we do today for him to be able to have that future.
Speaking about being here in this community, I know that you were living in Broward and you are planning on moving. Any progress on finding a house? I'm not asking for your address,
yeah, I know,
but just how close are you to finding a place?
I have been a little busy campaigning, if you hadn't noticed. So yeah, we're still continuing to look, obviously. In the last few months, it got a little less, but we are still continuing to look. Miami Lakes has always been a favorite place of ours.
What surprised you the most on election night, just in terms of the people who came up to you?
Wow, so people who came up to me, well, I wouldn't say surprised, but when Catherine Fernandez-Rundle came to my event very early on, it was wonderful. For the record, I've had a very long-term relationship with the state attorney because I worked for many years in this county, and I have had a professional relationship with her for many years. So for her to come to my event very early on said a lot and meant a lot to me.
You also spoke to the mayor, Danielle Levine Cava, who clearly was pushing a slate of candidates that did not include you. She was a major supporter, major proponent of James Reas. Can you share what your conversations with her were like on election night?
Absolutely. She was very much a lady and came to my event to say congratulations. And she said that I ran a very tough race well. And she said that she was very impressed with that and looked forward to working together.
So I want to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit, because there were some issues about the budget that came up when you were here for the debate against James Reas, and the idea that there is a pot of money, maybe upwards of $80 million, that was pulled out of everyone's budget and set aside waiting for the results of the election. Let's start with it this way. The current budget projected for next year for the Sheriff's Department, the newly created Sheriff's Department, that had been previously approved by the County Commission, is it adequate?
It is, I believe, short of the minimum of what will be needed for the Sheriff's Office. However, the money appears to have been set aside, like we mentioned. So I believe that we need to have conversations about that. Now, as a sheriff-elect, I think we'll be able to come back to the table and hopefully iron out these differences. Clearly, the money is in another pot. So I don't think the money is, just in the ethos out there. It's clearly identifiable. I will make a case for why I believe it should be in the Sheriff's Office. State statute clearly identifies that the local government will fund the Sheriff's Office so that it is fully operational. And my argument is this county deserves a Sheriff's Office that is funded just as it was as a police department. I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
So how much less is the Sheriff's Department being funded from what the Miami-Dade Police Department was funded previously? So
there are different ways, and so it's a little complicated, but I'll give you the overall measures that I think most people can understand. We talk about positions. We have currently lost 4 academies. That is approximately 170 police officer positions that have not been replaced that would backfill. That would put us at a deficit of officers.
So you're talking about a class of officers, or deputies.
Yes.
It's about 40 per class.
40 to 50 per class, exactly.
Gotcha.
Understanding that not everyone graduates and makes it all the way through, right? Okay.
So that's why were they canceled, by the way? Why were those classes canceled?
They were not funded.
They were not funded. Okay.
Correct.
You have applicants, though.
Correct.
Okay.
So see, that's why it's a little complicated. The second part is the actual funding of overtime. Now, a lot of people in the regular world, overtime means that's optional. Sounds like an optional thing. You shouldn't have to work overtime. If there's no money, there's no overtime. But overtime in the police world has to be built in because we work in catastrophes, things that we cannot plan for, but we have to have the funding for when they happen because we are the people who respond for when things happen. For example, a Surfside. For example, when we had the bridge collapse or hurricane, we have to have that funding. It is part of the nature of our business.
So why do you think that funding has been shorted going forward? Do you think that, are you concerned that the commission may try to use that as some sort of leverage with you? I'm not sure.
I absolutely don't know why. I don't want to really sit here and think of why. I would like to. I asked that question before when they had the opportunity to explain. I was not given an answer. At this point, I want to make my argument, and I want to be able to come to the table and figure out a way to fund it properly.
I've also, and maybe this is just me, I should be better informed. Does corrections come to the sheriff, or is corrections staying with the county?
That's a good question. But right now, it looks like it's staying with the county.
Do you think that that's a good?
Hold on.
Okay.
They haven't done a second vote. They took one vote of two, in which they did actually have enough votes to say yes, that corrections would move into the sheriff's office, but the second vote was not taken. So what is my opinion on the matter? I think that there is a place for corrections underneath the sheriff's office. However, I also believe that the sheriff's office needs to walk before they run. I have a fiscal responsibility to ensure that this sheriff's office stands up in a proper manner, in a way that's safe and secure, in a way that our employees are safe, so that we can continue to provide the services. So maybe it's phased in. Maybe you, for the first two, maybe you don't get corrections as transferred over in 2 or 3 years or 4 years. Thank you. I think that
something like that.
I think that's quite reasonable.
Let me ask you this. Here's an even dumber question, and I'm good at asking dumb questions. Do all the cars have to get repainted?
So that's a great question, and no. Our graphics are actually striped, and they're kind of like stickers that are placed on. So we'll be able to change out the striping on these on a phase-by-phase basis, and our cars are already statutorily required green and whites. That's what's required, not our uniforms, which is an urban myth. We don't pay a fine. We are and will remain a brown gown under my command for at least the 4 years that I've been elected for right now. It's a huge cost to go to green uniforms.
Who owns the cars? Who owns Miami-Dade Police Headquarters right now? Does the sheriff own that building, or do you have to essentially buy it or have it transferred from the county? I mean, literally, you are a new agency. So, like, the building that you came from today to come over here, does the county own that building, or will you own that building?
So the county owns the building and must provide it to the sheriff's office. The sheriff statutorily cannot own any real estate.
Okay, so it will always be that way.
Always be that way.
All right. It's just so much to sort of comprehend and sort of think about.
It is. Lucky for me, for 1.5 years, I prepared for this position prior to actually being elected to sheriff.
Now, I'm sort of curious. Right now, the person who ran against you, James Reas, is the Director of Public Safety. Does he have any role in obviously, he doesn't work for the Miami-Dade Police Department. He
Correct.
works for the mayor's office.
Correct.
You don't envision having him work within the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Department. Should that position remain in the county government?
That's for the mayor to decide.
Would you like to share an opinion as to whether or not you want a shadow government over at the?
There will be no shadow government over my office of the sheriff. That I can assure this community.
What's been the rank and file?
They have been wonderful. I was greeted with warm hugs and kisses, and just a real sense of an exhale.
All right. Rosie, I appreciate your coming in, and thank you very much, and congratulations on your victory.
Thank you very much.
All right. When we come back, we will look at what happened to Amendment 4 and what happens next in the fight to protect a woman's right to have an abortion in this state. Stay with us. Welcome back. Elections have consequences, and we will likely begin feeling those consequences of this election rather quickly. Perhaps one of the hardest consequences is going to fall on women because Florida failed to pass Amendment 4, which would have eliminated the 6-week abortion ban and returned Florida to where the state was before Roe was overturned, which would have meant a woman would have been allowed to have an abortion up until around 24 weeks. Slightly more than 57% of the voters voted yes on Amendment 4. But in Florida, constitutional amendments require 60% to pass. 7 other states passed measures on Tuesday protecting a woman's right to have an abortion. None of them required 60% approval. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to abortion moving forward, and joining me this morning is Anna Hockhammer, Executive Director of the Florida Women's Freedom Coalition. She is also the outgoing vice mayor of Pinecrest. So I know this was a campaign you worked very hard on. Give me your just initial reactions and thoughts. Here we are, a few days removed from the election.
I think the most important thing that everyone needs to focus on is that real women and girls in the state of Florida are affected by this abortion ban every single day. Victims of rape, victims of incest, people with pregnancies that don't develop the way they should, and that thousands of Florida women every single month are fleeing the state as domestic medical refugees to seek abortion care elsewhere. And whatever we end up chatting about on the politics of Amendment 4, it behooves us all to constantly return to the fact that real people suffer under these abortion bans. And my objective has always been to help real people have better outcomes. And I continue to be committed to that.
It must be almost surreal to wage a political fight, win it by 14 points, 14 points more, 57% of voters said yes, the 6-week ban is too much. 43% said they wanted to keep it in place. But I think that's even deceptive. We can talk more about that. But what's it like to have 50%, a clear majority of Floridians want something, and they're not going to be able to get it?
It's really frustrating. You know, my background is local government, right? I have been elected for the past 8 years in the village of Pinecrest. Very practical stuff, filling potholes, dealing with our police department, you know, making sure we have parks and recreation, trimming the trees. I am a practical person when it comes to politics. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that abortion access, while widely desired by the vast majority of voters in Florida, is going to once again become one of these issues that the legislature just refuses to act on, refuses to resolve, refuses to improve, refuses to acknowledge the overwhelming mandate and desires of Florida voters to see better access to modern, normal health care for women in this state. It's very frustrating.
You would hope, in essence, that the legislature would see the results of this and not see it as an affirmation of their policy of a 6-week abortion ban, but rather maybe cause them to rethink. They may not go back to a Rose standard that we had before, but would you at least argue that they should at least revisit maybe returning it to 12 or 15 weeks?
I think we've really moved the conversation in Florida around abortion, because what was interesting to me was that the opponents of Amendment 4 ran a campaign where they talked positively about abortion access. They insisted, oh, no, we have exceptions for rape victims, for incest victims, for people who have medical need. While at the same time, the medical community was saying, these are not exceptions we can actually use. We're unable to act because there's not enough clarity around when our licenses and our livelihoods and our freedom is on the line before we can provide responsible abortion care to the women in this state. You would expect people who are interested in good governance to hear that, to respond to their own campaign message and make it clearer for rape victims, for child victims of incest, for women who are in the most profoundly heartbreaking medical crises to get the care they need. But what I'm seeing based on the reactions in Tallahassee and out of the governor's office is they're doubling down on, we believe that life begins at conception and therefore we refuse to budge. It's an extremely frustrating place to be.
You mentioned the governor, you mentioned the campaign. This defeat for this amendment and the marijuana amendment has, I think, profound consequences going forward because of the way the governor used, and I could argue abused, his power. I've never seen anything like what you had to, the wave, the attack on this amendment by the governor on any issue ever, using taxpayer money to run ads against this amendment, using the resources of state agencies, the Department of Health, the Department of Children and Families, just go to Agency for Healthcare Administration, on and on and on, threatening TV stations with criminal prosecution if they ran certain ads in support of the amendment. And perhaps the most egregious of all was the amount of misinformation that they put out there, specifically around the issue of that this amendment would have done away with parental consent. this amendment would not have done away with parental consent. The supporters, you, others, made it clear that was neither the intention, the desire, or anything related to it, and it would have no effect on it. I guess that's how frustrating is that for you when you look at what the governor did? You're an elected official. Can you imagine using your office in that way?
I think there are some profound ethical questions around using the state that way. No one has ever seen this sort of weaponization of state institutions and the soft power and the responsibility that comes to elected officials and to their appointees to use their official resources in the most respectable way. Listen, the Florida Constitution gives us, the residents of Florida, the voters of Florida, the right to petition the state to amend the state constitution. That is also in our Constitution. So to see the state itself use its resources to put down this widespread popular desire to see abortion access enshrined in our Constitution should be disturbing to every single one of us. They used our own tax dollars to try and thwart popular will, and they
to spread
succeeded
propaganda.
in doing it. To spread propaganda.
Joe Gruters, I apologize for interrupting. Joe Gruters, the former chair of the Republican Party, called what the governor was doing distributing propaganda, using state resources to spread propaganda, both Amendments 3 and 4.
You know, listen, an awful lot of people with no party affiliation and an awful lot of people who are officially affiliated with the Republican Party believe that abortion access should be widely available up to the point of viability in Florida. They voted that way in Amendment 4. Now, we live in a gerrymandered state. It's extremely hard to fight back on a legislative front in a state as gerrymandered as we are. It's extremely hard to fight back against the state. But I want to call on each and every one of the over 6 million Florida voters who voted on Amendment 4 to talk to your elected officials, whatever their political affiliation, up and down the chain, to let them know you expect them to act, to roll back some of the crueler and more inhumane aspects of this abortion ban. If even people who opposed Amendment 4 acknowledge that rape victims, victims of incest, and people with medical emergencies should be able to get proper treatment, then the fact that this abortion ban makes it near impossible for doctors to provide that should be a clarion call for people in Tallahassee to respond appropriately, both on a legislative and an administrative level. We must hold our elected officials accountable and not throw abortion access into the same pile as our society clearly has with gun violence and, heck, even the unaffordability of insurance. We seem to just throw all this stuff onto a pile, assume that we can't fix it, and give people a pass. And I want to say, as a former now elected official, don't give people a pass. Reach out and tell them you expect them to act, and you expect them to act soon. Women are suffering. Listen, I serve on the board of a group called Women's Emergency Network. It's the oldest emergency abortion fund in the state of Florida. They helped over 600 women leave the state of Florida just last month to get abortion care. I encourage everyone who cares about this to support their local abortion funds like WEN, because they are stretched to the limit. We're creating an underground railroad for women to get the care they need.
I got to cut you off there. Anna, thank you very much. We're going to continue to have this as a conversation. This doesn't end with the election this cycle. All right. We'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.